Can't wait to feel your hands on me again, face blowing a kiss. Except she sent it to me while I was at work. I wasn't the one she meant. I was hunched over my desk at 9 p.m., the office practically empty except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of the janitor's cart rolling down the hallway. My eyes were burning from staring at spreadsheets all day, and I was counting down the minutes until I could finally head home to my tiny apartment and collapse on the couch. That's when my phone buzzed. The message preview made my heart skip a beat at first. It was from her, and for a split second, I felt this warm flutter in my chest thinking she was being sweet and romantic. We'd been together for 8 months, and lately things had felt distant. She'd been working late too, or so she said, and we barely saw each other except for quick coffee runs on weekends. But then I actually read the message properly, and my stomach dropped like I'd just stepped off a cliff. Can't wait to feel your hands on me again, face blowing a kiss. The thing is, we hadn't been intimate in over 2 weeks. Hell, we'd barely even hugged. I'd been trying to give her space because she said work was stressing her out, but this text felt like it came from a completely different relationship than the one I thought we were in. My hands were actually shaking as I typed back. Wrong person? Those 3 dots appeared immediately, like she was frantically typing. Then, oops lol. That was for you, babe. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. I glanced at the top of our text thread, and the contact name read, Baby Blue Heart, and I knew for a fact that wasn't how I was saved in her phone. She'd shown me before when we were joking around about contact names. I was just saved as my actual name. I sat there in that empty office, the cleaning crew vacuuming somewhere down the hall, and felt like the floor was dissolving beneath me. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my ribcage. I kept staring at that contact name, refreshing the screen, hoping somehow I was seeing things wrong. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying every conversation we'd had over the past few months, every excuse about working late, every time she seemed distracted when we were together, the way she'd started keeping her phone face down during dinner, how she'd suddenly become protective of her laptop, closing it quickly whenever I walked by. The next morning, I felt like I was moving through thick fog. I went through the motions of getting ready for work, but my mind was spinning. I needed to know the truth, but I also felt sick thinking about what I might find. That's when I remembered something from my college days. My roommate had shown me this trick once for mirroring phone screens to laptops. It was supposed to be for presentations, but the technology worked both ways if you knew what you were doing. She'd connected to my laptop Wi-Fi before when she stayed over, and if the connection was still active, I felt like I was betraying everything I believed about trust and privacy, but I couldn't stop myself. When she came over that evening for what she called a quick dinner, I made sure her phone connected to my Wi-Fi while she was in the bathroom. My laptop was already set up in the bedroom, hidden behind some books. After she left, claiming she had to finish a project, I opened my laptop with trembling fingers. What I found made me physically nauseous. Update 1. I spent the entire weekend going through everything, and I felt like I was losing my mind. The messages went back months. Not just flirty texts, but actual intimate conversations, photos I never wanted to see, voice messages where she was saying things to other people that she'd never said to me. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. There wasn't just one other guy. There were 4. 4 completely different men, and she was juggling all of us like we were characters in some twisted game she was playing. The first guy seemed to think they were exclusive and had been together for over a year. She was sending him good morning texts every day, calling him her forever person, talking about future plans and meeting his family. With him, she was this sweet, domestic girlfriend who loved cooking and wanted to adopt a dog together. The second guy was getting a completely different version of her. She was this wild, spontaneous party girl who was tired of serious relationships and just wanted to have fun. She was sending him pictures from clubs I'd never been to, talking about how she'd never want to settle down. The third guy thought she was this intellectual, career-focused woman who was too busy for drama. She was discussing books with him that I'd never seen her read, pretending to have interests in art and philosophy that she'd never mentioned to me. And the fourth guy, with him, she was playing this victim role, telling him about her toxic ex who wouldn't leave her alone, how she was healing from past trauma and needed someone patient and understanding. Each relationship had been going on for different lengths of time. Some overlapped by months. She had elaborate systems for keeping us all separate, different social media accounts, different friend groups, even different neighborhoods where she'd meet each of us. I felt physically sick reading through it all, not just because of the betrayal, but because I realized I didn't even know who she really was. Was any version of her real? Was the girl I'd fallen for just another character she was playing? But the thing that pushed me over the edge was reading how she talked about all of us behind our backs. She had screenshots of our conversations shared with her friends, making fun of things we'd said, ranking us by different criteria like we were contestants in some sick reality show. She called me the safe option and said I was good practice for a real relationship. I stayed up until 4 a.m. that Sunday night, screenshotting everything, organizing it all. I felt like a detective gathering evidence for a case that was going to destroy multiple lives, including my own. Monday morning, I couldn't even pretend to work. I kept staring at my phone, wondering if any of the other guys were going through the same thing I was. Did they have doubts? Were they lying awake at night wondering why something felt off? That's when I made a decision that I knew would change everything. I created a group chat. Finding the other guys wasn't easy, but she'd been sloppy in some of her messages. Phone numbers were mentioned, social media handles were visible in screenshots she'd shared. It took me most of Tuesday evening, but I managed to identify all 4 of them. The group message I sent was simple. We need to talk about her name. I have information you need to see. Update 2. The responses came in within minutes of each other, and they were all variations of the same thing: confusion, denial, and anger. Not at her, but at me for starting drama. The guy who thought they'd been exclusive for a year called me crazy and said he was going to block me. The party girl guy accused me of being a stalker. The intellectual one said I was obviously some ex trying to cause problems. But I prepared for this. I started sharing screenshots in the group chat, carefully censoring personal details, but showing enough to prove what was happening. The conversation timestamps. The different contact names she used for each of us. The way she'd describe identical dates she'd taken us all on, just changing the details slightly. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the first message came from the guy who thought they were exclusive. This can't be real. Followed by, I think I'm going to be sick. The party guy was the angriest. I can't believe I was played like this. What broke my heart was reading their messages as they started sharing their own experiences. Each of them described the same distant behavior I'd noticed. The same excuses about working late. The same way she'd started being protective of her phone. We'd all been living in this bubble, thinking we were the only ones experiencing these red flags. But here's where everything took a turn I never expected. The intellectual guy, the one who'd been getting the bookish, career-focused version of her, dropped a bomb in the chat that made everything 10 times worse. He said he'd been suspicious for weeks and had done some digging of his own. Turns out, she wasn't just cheating on us with each other. There were more people we didn't even know about. He'd found dating profiles where she was active, social media accounts under different names, even what looked like some kind of sugar daddy situation with an older man. But the worst part? She wasn't even who she said she was to any of us. The job she'd told me about? Fake. The apartment she said she lived in? Belonged to someone else. Even her last name was different on different social media accounts. The story about her family that had made me feel so close to her? Completely fabricated. We were all dating a ghost. The guy who'd been with her the longest started sharing details that made me realize how deep this went. She'd borrowed money from him for emergencies that never happened. She'd used his address for packages and mail. She'd even borrowed his car, claiming hers was in the shop, and disappeared for entire weekends. As we compared notes, a pattern emerged that was scarier than just cheating. This wasn't just someone who couldn't commit or who made bad choices. This was someone who was systematically using people, extracting what she needed from each relationship, and moving on when it became inconvenient. The victim story guy revealed that she'd been asking him for financial help for months, claiming she was trying to escape an abusive situation. She'd shown him fake bruises and everything. Meanwhile, she was living in what he described as a luxury apartment and driving a car that was way out of her supposed budget. We realized we needed to meet in person. Update 3. The 5 of us met at a coffee shop downtown that Thursday evening. It was surreal, sitting around a table with 4 strangers who'd all been manipulated by the same person. We were all different ages, from different backgrounds, with completely different interests. The only thing we had in common was that we'd all fallen for different versions of the same lie. The oldest guy, the one from the sugar daddy situation we'd discovered, looked exhausted. He'd been supporting her financially for months, thinking he was helping someone get back on their feet after a divorce. She'd told him she had kids from a previous marriage and needed help with childcare costs. Turns out, no kids existed. The youngest guy had only been seeing her for a few weeks, but she'd already convinced him to let her stay at his place, temporarily, while she found a new apartment. His building's security cameras had footage of her bringing different men to his apartment when he wasn't there. As we shared more details, the picture that emerged was terrifying. She'd been systematically targeting guys through different methods, dating apps, social media, even approaching people at coffee shops and bookstores. She had types she looked for: lonely guys, guys with stable jobs, guys who seemed trusting and generous. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. The barista who'd been serving us coffee had been listening to our conversation, and during her break, she came over to our table. She apologized for eavesdropping, but said she recognized the description we were giving. She'd dated her too. Except in her version, she was a lesbian who'd never been with men and was looking for her first serious relationship with a woman. She'd been love-bombing this barista for weeks, talking about moving in together, adopting cats, even discussing marriage. But it got worse. The barista had a friend who worked at another coffee shop across town, and she'd mentioned this amazing new girlfriend to her. When she described her, her friend's face went white. She'd been dating the same woman for months, and in that relationship, she was supposedly bisexual and exploring her sexuality after getting out of a long-term relationship with a man. We sat there in stunned silence as we realized we weren't dealing with someone who was just cheating or even someone who was a compulsive liar. We were dealing with someone who was running what basically amounted to a criminal operation. The barista pulled out her phone and showed us messages that made our situation look simple. She'd been asked to loan money, to let her move in, to co-sign for credit cards. When she'd hesitated, she'd been emotionally manipulated with stories about family emergencies and health crises. That's when we decided we couldn't just confront her ourselves. This was bigger than hurt feelings or broken hearts. People were being financially exploited, manipulated into making major life decisions, even potentially being put in danger. We decided to gather everything we had and take it to the police. Final update. The police took our situation more seriously than I expected. Apparently, what she was doing fell under several categories of fraud and identity theft. The detective we spoke with said they'd seen cases like this before, but rarely with someone operating on such a large scale. They asked us to keep documenting everything while they investigated, which meant continuing to pretend we didn't know what was happening. It was torture, receiving her messages and having to respond normally while knowing what I knew. The investigation moved quickly once they got involved. It turned out she had multiple social security numbers, several fake IDs, and bank accounts under different names. The money she'd borrowed from various people was being funneled into accounts that connected to other fraud schemes in different states. But the most shocking discovery came when they traced her real identity. She wasn't even from our state. Her real name was completely different from any name she'd used with any of us. She'd been doing this same thing in 3 other cities over the past 2 years, leaving trails of confused and financially damaged people behind her. The scariest part was finding out how she'd chosen us. She'd been methodical about it, using social media to research potential targets, finding out our interests, our vulnerabilities, even our financial situations before approaching us. Everything about our relationships had been calculated. When they finally arrested her, she was in the middle of setting up new identities to move to another city. They found notebooks with detailed information about dozens of people, not just the ones she was actively dating, but potential future targets. The trial was surreal. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to the prosecutor describe the scope of what she'd done, I barely recognized the person I thought I'd been in love with. The defense tried to paint her as someone with mental health issues who needed help rather than punishment, but the evidence of premeditation was overwhelming. She got sentenced to 3 years for fraud and identity theft, with restitution ordered for the money she'd stolen. But honestly, the financial damage was nothing compared to the psychological impact on all of us. The other guys and I stayed in touch for a while after everything was over. We'd formed this weird bond through shared trauma. A few of them ended up in therapy to work through trust issues. One moved to a different state to start over completely. For me, the hardest part wasn't even feeling betrayed. It was realizing that I'd fallen in love with someone who never existed. Every memory I had, every moment I thought was special, was just part of an elaborate performance. How do you grieve a relationship that was never real? It's been 8 months now since everything came out. I still get paranoid sometimes when I'm dating someone new, analyzing their stories for inconsistencies, looking for red flags that might not even be there. I've had to learn how to trust my instincts again while also not letting fear control my life. The strangest thing is that sometimes I still miss her, or miss who I thought she was. Even knowing it was all fake, those feelings I had were real. The person I was when I was with that version of her felt happier, more confident, more optimistic about the future. It's hard to let go of that, even when you know it was built on lies. I've learned to be more careful about sharing personal information early in relationships, and I pay attention to inconsistencies in ways I never did before. But I've also learned that you can't protect yourself from everything without closing yourself off from genuine connection. The barista from the coffee shop and I actually ended up becoming friends through all this. She's the only person who really understands what it feels like to have been manipulated that thoroughly. We joke sometimes about starting a support group for people who've been conned by professional manipulators, but honestly, it's not as rare as you'd think. Looking back, I can see warning signs I ignored because I wanted so badly to believe in what we had. The way she never wanted to hang out with my friends. How she always had excuses for why I couldn't meet her family or see where she lived. The fact that everything about her seemed too perfect, too tailored to exactly what I was looking for in a partner. But I've also learned not to blame myself for falling for it. She was good at what she did. She'd had practice. And ultimately, the fact that I was trusting and open to love wasn't a weakness, even though it made me vulnerable. I'm dating someone new now, and it's different. More careful, maybe, but also more real. We've been taking things slow, meeting each other's friends, sharing mundane details about our actual lives. It's not as exciting as that whirlwind romance was, but it's solid in a way I never experienced before. Sometimes I wonder what happened to all the other people she targeted in other cities, the ones who never found out the truth. Are they still out there thinking they were special to someone who never saw them as anything more than a mark? Or did they eventually figure it out on their own and just never had anyone to share the story with? The whole experience taught me that reality, even when it's messier and more complicated than fantasy, is worth more than the most convincing lie. And sometimes the most important thing you can learn about someone isn't who they are when they're trying to impress you, but who they are when they think no one is watching.